The moment I stepped into high school, I never expected my life to be flipped upside down in one fateful day. I was just a junior with a stomach aching from some bug that hit me hard, and I needed the bathroom fast. As I bolted through the hallway, something unsettling caught my ear, a faint whistling sound from the opposite side of the hall. I didn't think much of it. I was desperate. As I neared the bathroom, though, the sound grew louder, unmistakable. Who could be whistling in the restroom? I opened the door to find a man inside, just standing there, whistling away as if he were on a leisurely stroll. I didn't want to make a scene, but this was not my idea of a relaxing bathroom break. I was about to make a mess, and I needed privacy. So, I quickly entered the stall, and all I could hear was that constant whistling. It was driving me insane. I needed to finish fast. I could practically feel the clock ticking. 10 minutes in, I realized something was off. Who was this guy? Why was he still here? The bathroom was nearly empty, and he just lingered, humming in a way that was almost too casual. At this point, I was starting to wonder if he was the janitor, but my desire for privacy overtook my curiosity. I just wanted him gone. As soon as I finished, I rushed to the sink, trying not to make eye contact with the stranger. I was embarrassed, and frankly, I wanted to escape. But then, the unexpected happened. He walked toward me. He was so close that I felt his breath on my neck, and I froze. I couldn't breathe. "What the hell, man?" I blurted out. His face was stone cold, and then, without warning, he smiled. That smile, it was something I will never forget. A twisted, unsettling grin that chilled me to my core. I didn't stick around to figure out what he was about to do next. I bolted out of there and texted my friend about the encounter. When I got back to class, I found out that my friend had a similar experience with the same guy. He was planning to tell the principal, but we never did. Later that day, we made plans to walk after school like we always did. We were heading to a diner, and for once, things felt normal again. But as we passed through the usual trail, the weirdest thing happened. Peyton, one of my friends, suddenly turned pale and pointed ahead. "No way. Isn't that him?" The janitor. We all froze. I couldn't believe it. It was him, standing in the distance like something out of a nightmare. Peyton wanted to turn around, but I kept walking. Something about it didn't feel right. As we passed him, he stared us down, and then he called out, asking if we wanted to hang out. Hang out? Seriously? He was way too old to be asking kids our age that. He was pushing 55 at least. We quickened our pace, but it wasn't enough. He started running after us, and that's when everything went south. I looked back and saw him holding a knife. Panic surged through me. We screamed for help and ran. We ran for what felt like forever, and just when we thought we'd lost him, we heard sirens, and it wasn't the police yet. Later, we found out the truth. He wasn't a janitor. He was a man who'd somehow slipped into the school, posing as staff for who knows how long. The school didn't know who he was. He had no clearance. He was just some creep in disguise. It gets worse. He was a convicted sex offender. He had been abusing minors for years, with court orders keeping him away from kids. But somehow he managed to slip through the cracks. I honestly think he was planning to escalate things even further this time, maybe even kill someone. The next day, we reported everything. The truth was more terrifying than we realized. But that wasn't the only time I found myself caught in an emergency lockdown. This one, though, would be different. It was my last day of high school, and it all started as a normal lunch hour. But when the intercom clicked on, everything changed. This was no drill. Lockdown procedures immediately. The voice was urgent, panic creeping through. We were told to turn off lights and lock doors, and something felt off. When the power cut out, my friends thought it would be funny to sneak out. I decided to follow them. Mistake. We were in pitch black halls, barely able to see, and then we heard it. 3 gunshots. I froze. I ran with my friend Andrew, heading straight for the front doors. The sirens were getting closer, but we couldn't risk being caught sneaking out. We ran, desperate to get to the woods where we could hide. We made it there, but fear was crawling through us. What if they thought we were part of the danger? What if we were being hunted down by the police? And then the unthinkable happened. The police found us, not realizing we'd been missing. They were searching for the shooter. Turns out, it was a kid from another school, a year younger than me, and he came with one goal in mind: to kill a girl. But luckily, no one got hurt. It was a day I'll never forget. That tension, the fear, the uncertainty, and what happened next would haunt me for the rest of my life. It was a warning. On my final day, everything changed again. It was supposed to be the end of high school, but it felt like the start of something darker. In biology class, I tried to avoid the chaos at home by hiding in the library. But then lockdown. It was too real this time. I was alone, and then a shadow in the library. A flashlight pointed right at me. The moment I feared the most. Tyler. It was him, and he had a gun. My friend. I had to act fast. I managed to convince him to drop the weapon, but I knew he wasn't in his right mind. He was a kid, broken by years of bullying, a tragic home life, and a mind teetering on the edge. But in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't just about one kid. This was about all of us. About raising awareness and preventing the madness before it begins. The aftermath. The days following the lockdown were a blur. My friends and I were still processing everything that had happened. But at the same time, I felt like I couldn't escape that eerie feeling. The fear that something was still lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike. The janitor, no, the imposter, was still in my mind, a constant reminder of how something that seemed so normal could turn into a life-threatening situation. The next morning, I woke up with a headache, not from the stress of the night before, but from the weight of everything happening around me. I hadn't slept well. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that janitor's cold smile and heard his unsettling whistling. It was as if I was haunted by it, and no matter how hard I tried to push it away, the memory kept returning. I didn't want to think about him anymore, but I couldn't help it. It's one thing to face danger in the moment, to feel the rush of adrenaline as you flee for your life. But the aftermath was far worse. It was filled with what-ifs and sleepless nights. My mind replayed every little detail over and over again. His smile, the way he had followed us, the way he had made us feel so vulnerable. And then there was Tyler. I hadn't heard from him since that day in the library, but I couldn't stop thinking about him either. He had been my friend once, a part of my life when everything felt simpler. I had no idea what had happened to him in those years apart. He had always been a little off, but I never imagined he would go this far. The gun, the fear in his eyes, it was all too much. I kept replaying the moment when he had broken down, crying on the floor, dropping his weapon like it was the heaviest thing in the world. It was like I was seeing him for the first time, truly seeing him, and it was terrifying. The nightmares. It wasn't long before the nightmares began. Every night, I would wake up in a cold sweat, the image of Tyler standing in the hallway, gun in hand, frozen in my mind. The darkness would close in on me, and I'd hear those voices, whispers at first, then louder, until they were screaming. I didn't know if they were real or if they were just in my head, but every time I opened my eyes, I felt like something was watching me. Something far worse than the janitor. Something more dangerous than I could ever imagine. I started avoiding the library after that. The memories were just too strong. Every time I passed it, I could hear the faint echo of Tyler's voice, the sound of his footsteps pacing back and forth, his muffled breathing as he waited for me to find him. I couldn't understand why he had done it, but I knew one thing for sure. He had been broken. I couldn't blame him for everything, but at the same time, I couldn't forgive him either. The days passed, and it was like nothing had changed. But deep down, I knew everything had. I had seen something that day, something that no one should ever have to see. I had seen the darkness in someone's soul. It was terrifying, because I knew I wasn't the only one who felt it. The world was full of people like Tyler, people who had been pushed to the edge, people who felt like there was no way out. The return to normal. It was a few days after the lockdown when I finally went back to school. Everything felt off. The hallways were quieter, people were on edge, and every door felt like it was hiding something. It was as if the entire school was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I didn't want to be there. I just wanted to go back to my normal life, but I didn't know how to do that. It wasn't like things went back to normal. They couldn't. How could they? We had just been through a traumatic experience, and yet, the school expected us to act like nothing had happened. Teachers carried on with their lessons, students whispered behind closed doors, and no one talked about the elephant in the room. The janitor was gone, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there, that he hadn't finished what he'd started. I started to notice things I hadn't before. Every person who walked by me seemed suspicious. Every glance felt like it held a hidden message. I would catch people staring at me and quickly look away, as if they were in on some secret that I didn't know. The fear had become all-consuming. I couldn't escape it, no matter how hard I tried. And then one day it happened. I saw him again. Not the janitor, but someone else. Someone who I had never thought I would see again. Someone from my past. A new threat. His name was Aaron. He had been a quiet kid in middle school, the kind of person who kept to himself and never caused trouble. We hadn't spoken in years, but I recognized him immediately. He was sitting in the back of the classroom, eyes glued to the window, as if he were trying to disappear into the glass. He looked different, darker, more withdrawn. Something had changed in him. Something had broken. When our eyes met, I felt a chill run down my spine. I don't know how to explain it, but there was something about the way he looked at me that made me feel scared. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He didn't do anything except stare. And it wasn't a normal stare. It was the kind of stare that sent shivers through your body. It was like he knew something about me, like he had been watching me for a long time. I tried to ignore him. I didn't want to get caught up in whatever weirdness was going on with him. But as the days passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Aaron wasn't just some quiet kid anymore. There was a darkness in his eyes, something that I had seen before, something I didn't want to see again. The confrontation, it was after school when I saw him again. I was walking home with Elias and Peyton, laughing about some dumb joke, when I turned a corner and almost ran right into him. Aaron was standing there, his eyes fixed on me. "What do you want, Aaron?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't answer. He just stared at me, and then he whispered something under his breath that I couldn't hear. "What?" I asked, taking a step back. Something about his voice was wrong. It was like a snake hissing from behind a wall, cold and dangerous. He leaned in, his breath hot on my ear. "I know what you did." I froze. What did he mean by that? "I know what you did," he repeated, his voice colder this time. And then he walked away without another word. I didn't know what to do. What was he talking about? What had I done? The investigation. I couldn't let it go. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that there were things happening around me that I couldn't explain. I had to get to the bottom of it, no matter how deep I had to go. I started asking around, talking to people who had known Aaron back in middle school, trying to figure out what had happened to him. What had changed? No one had any answers. No one had seen anything out of the ordinary. It was like he had just become someone else. But one day, I found a clue. It was a message left on a locker, barely visible. It was a warning. Someone had written, "He's coming for you." I knew I had to be careful. I wasn't the only one at risk. There were others out there who might be in danger too. The final showdown. The tension built up over the weeks. I couldn't escape the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. I could feel it in my bones, in the pit of my stomach. The calm before the storm was almost over. One night, after school, I got a call. It was from Elias. "We need to talk," he said urgently. "It's about Aaron." He told me he had seen Aaron sneaking around the school late at night, and that he was carrying something large and heavy. I knew this was it. I knew that whatever was about to happen, it was going to happen tonight. And then I saw him, Aaron, standing there, waiting for me.